Welcome the new faces. Adish, you're a new face. Akash, sorry. Adish is my parliamentary colleague. Thank you very much for coming, because it's very important that you come, and I was hoping that you would come today, because I propose to spend this press conference focusing only on the issue that we are currently engaged in the country, the matter of the president being appointed, a selectee, and the law, and the general conversation. Because it is difficult for me as Prime Minister, having the responsibility for doing what I'm required to do under the oath of office, which is to observe the Constitution and the law as written and exists at the time of my office, to swallow a lot of what is being fed to the population. Because most people in the country, even professional people and people with many degrees, may never have seen the Constitution, may never have read it, and in many instances would have read it and not remember or even understand it. The average person would have to rely on us, people like me and my colleagues, especially parliamentarians, to guide them along what is constitutional, what is not, what is legal, what is lawful, and so on. And that is why I've asked members of the media today to pay some attention and some of your effort in helping the population to understand what, in effect, is the Constitution on this particular matter, and also to not be disturbed and dismayed by the rhetoric, the vitriol, the fulmination of people who I will not describe other than, in some instances, parliamentary colleagues, some with serious responsibility. I looked at this article carried in the newspaper, and the headline is, "Mark labels Kangaloo yes woman and puppet." This Mark here is Senator Wade Mark, and I'll come back to him a little later. Except that this time I must start my presentation by referring to what this Mark, who is no ordinary person, he is the leader of the opposition in our Senate, the place where Mrs. Kangaloo sits. And he describes the selection by the government of Mrs. Christine Kangaloo in the following way. Not only, and I'm quoting him here, not only is our Constitution under attack and assault, our very democratic rights, our very democracy, rights and freedoms, and our ability to uphold free and fair elections in our nation, all of these matters are in danger. Now, that is a statement coming from a leader in the Senate who took part in the meeting that we had here in this building, where 3 members of the government sat down with 3 senior members of the opposition in a civilized way. And from this podium, I did tell you that we had a very cordial meeting, and once or twice we even had to laugh at ourselves or others in there. The bottom line is that there are people in this country who set out deliberately to mislead the population, and I will go as far as to say to incite the population. Because when you are told that an action of the government drives at the heart of the Constitution and brings the country under attack and assault, and democracy and our Bill of Rights, our group of rights, and our freedoms, and even our elections, our free and fair elections, our ability to conduct these elections, now threatened. This is fear-mongering of the worst kind, and is purely for one purpose: to cause the population to be incited against the actions of the government. An officer is coming in, if the officer is elected by the parliament, to a job in a 5-year term, And this kind of rhetoric is meant to poison the well from which the water will flow from the tenure of that officer. That's what this is about. So for those persons who have not been familiar with the Constitution, I'm not really required to, because you rely on others to teach you. Let me take you to my copy of the Constitution. This is the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. My name is, this is my signature. I don't know what copy and what edition Senator Mark and his caucus use, but this is what we use on this side of the government. And I take you to page 29, paragraph 24, very early in the series of clauses in the laws of this country, the fundamentals, the Constitution. Section 24, chapter 3, which is headed The President. Section 24 says, and I quote, "For the benefit of John public who have been exposed to the deliberate incitement and misinformation from people who want a certain outcome and a certain condition to prevail in this country." And it says, quote, "Where a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives is elected as president, his seat in the Senate or the House of Representatives, respectively, shall thereupon become vacant." I want to repeat that for the public who has been fed all the horse manure coming down from the UNC and those others who talk about the Constitution, because they are rooting their argument against the government's actions in unconstitutionality. This is what the Constitution says for all of us. Where a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives is elected as president, his seat in the Senate or House of Representatives, respectively, shall thereupon become vacant. This means, in simple English, that the framers of this Constitution, the Constitution which I swear to uphold before I can enter into this office as Prime Minister, is that it is anticipated and it makes provision for a member of the House or the Senate to be considered, to qualify to be elected and to be voted into office as president in this country, written in the Constitution. And it says, when that happens, the person who is incumbent in those positions, any of those positions, must immediately give up that position in the Parliament. It says, shall thereupon, meaning, as it happens, this is what should follow. They automatically have to get out, the position becomes vacant. That is the law. What does the UNC and all those who are leading this population down the road want me to do? To disregard the law or to pretend that that is not the law? And let me just take you to the history of the Parliament on this matter and my own involvement in it. This document is a copy of the nomination paper of A.N. Robinson, 3rd of February 1997. At the time when this document was generated, we were in the opposition, we the PNM. Mr. Robinson was a sitting member of the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. He was the leader of a political party which had formed part of the government of that time. As a matter of fact, it was his leadership of 2 seats from Tobago that generated a government in which he was a minister. And while being a sitting minister, under the provisions of Section 24 that I just read, Mr. Robinson agreed to be nominated, selected by the UNC, and this is the document that nominated him. And that document, interestingly enough, one of the persons who signed that document is a certain Kamla Prasad Bisesa from Light Pole 265, Sign Village in Siparia, a member of parliament. And this is her signature. At a later time, another election came up for president. We were also in the opposition. No, we were the government then. We were the government. And the UNC was in the opposition. And they put up a nominee for the post of president. And remember, the ballot for this post is secret in the parliament. Very unique. It's by secret ballot. So once you're a nominee, you're in the dance. This is February 14th, 2003. 3 p.m. Details of the nomination as follows. Ramdial, Ganesh Ramdial, from Paria Avenue. He was put up by Rudal Munilal, Kamla Prasad Bisesa. They signed it. So I want to ask Senator Munilal this afternoon, when these two people, particularly the cabinet minister and leader of a political party, opposed to the PDM, was put up by the UNC, was the country in danger? Was the country under attack, under assault, and our democracy, our rights, and our ability to conduct free and fair elections, were those threatened? Or is it that there's something about Christine Kangaloo that threatens the population? I raise this so that the population can do what they must do, which is to take the facts as they are, know the law as it is, and disregard those who would misrepresent to them, senior counsel, self-appointed or otherwise, because this is all politics and has nothing to do with unconstitutionality. I will go further, and I will take issue with the commentators from the university as well, because maybe it's because I spent so much of my life in the university that I look to the university, my alma mater, sometimes to bail us out with intellectual interventions, with the work of research, not joining the he say, she say, but adding to the quality of the debate and the national discourse. When they write that there's all this division and this political wall that is, as though people who are in political parties, like the party that I'm in, that we are sheep, and whichever way the lead sheep goes, the rest fall and go over the cliff. That's what they do. As if we don't have any, we give up our brains. We disregard our upbringing, and we just do what somebody tells us to do. But let me tell you all something. I look very carefully in the discourse in this country on the whole question of the nomination of a president from a political party and this automatic vote that is going to go. The history of this country is not so. It is not so at all. Because when this nomination was made for A.N. Robinson, I was a member of the House, an opposition member, and in the conversation in my party, I did not agree with the nomination offered by my organization, but the Constitution makes provision for secret ballot for good reason. And when the votes were counted on this day in the Parliament, you would have seen Mr. Robinson got more votes than the votes of the party that sponsored him. And I think that's important. And it's important for the intellectuals and the columnists to take note of that. Because if you do, you would realize that the person who today is leading the government in this process could tell you now that as a PNM member of parliament, I voted for the UNC nominee A.N. Robinson. And I was not the only one. I think there was at least one other vote from the PNM. Two others from the PNM. So the process and the system worked. A nomination was made by the majority, and by secret ballot, there was a combination of support. That is important. I have not seen anybody mention that in this slew of vituperation that is going on now, trying to mislead the public. One expects that the party with the majority, if it's a disciplined organization, or if people feel strongly enough, because that's why it is a secret ballot, provided for in the Constitution. So if they want to talk Constitution, they have to acknowledge that. And then, of course, for those who acknowledge it in some cursory way, they would tell you, well, oh, especially the leader of the opposition who's leading the charge, oh, Christine Kangaloo, and she goes disgracefully to her family. They're all in the bosoms and the bowels of the PNM, meaning what? That the rights in the Constitution prevent them from supporting a political party? How many families in this country are in the bowels of the UNC? As far as we're concerned, the only person in the bowel of the UNC is the member for Naparima. But then you come to denigrate people and to describe people in the worst way in a process where we're looking for harmony in the country. It's bad enough that you can't agree to consensus. Because when we had the meeting here, it was a very cordial meeting. And my colleague from Siparia said to us all, I don't want to make a decision now. I will go back to my caucus and let them know what the government's position is. Give me until tomorrow morning. That was the nature of the discussion. We left in the most cordial way. I don't know if the UNC keeps a caucus in the driveway of the Prime Minister's residence, because that is where the opposition leader began to spill her bile. Having told the meeting she will go to her caucus, maybe she couldn't go to the caucus in the way she promised. But long before she got to the caucus, right outside the gate here, she was spewing all the bile about a simple matter where the population, and I dare say the government, has taken action for a smooth transition, not expecting that everybody will agree, because our system is not one that you have to get 99% or 100% of the votes. We know that there are people for all kinds of reasons who will not agree. But on the balance of it, the vast majority of the citizenry from all walks of life will express their views, and we believe that our selection would find favor with that. And that brings me back to the leader in the Senate again, Mr. Mark, because he needs to be dealt with. Since he appointed himself to tell the country what he's going to tell the country as he declares war. Because I can tell you now, half an hour ago or thereabouts, the nomination from the government to nominate Mrs. Kangaloo has gone into the parliament. So as I speak to you now, she has been duly nominated by probably all the members of the government side, because the opposition having indicated that it will have no part of it. We have a duty to put in at least 12, because you need 12 nominees to make the nomination valid, and all our members were keen, and I suspect that they would have all have signed. So a nomination exists now, and Senator Mark, of all people in this country, will declare to our children, our grandchildren, and the literate and the illiterate in the country, that if that happens, he will declare war on Trinidad and Tobago. Well, I want to tell Senator Mark today, when you declare war on Trinidad and Tobago, I will declare peace. P-I-E-C-E. Listen to this gentleman who is leading us in the Senate. And he says, I quote him, "Whoever is in that office has to exercise a certain authority, and that authority that is being exercised must be exercised with a certain degree of impartiality, free of political influences, must be non-partisan, and must not be dictated by extraneous circumstances," unquote. That is Senator Wade Mark, leader in the Senate. It is clear that Senator Wade Mark did not believe this or know this when he sat as Speaker in our Parliament. When there was an issue before the House, a motion which I filed, raising questions, serious questions, about the involvement and conduct or misconduct of a member of the cabinet with respect to that hotel out the street out there, which is now called the Bricks, where taxpayers lost hundreds of millions of dollars. And the then member of the House, the Senate, had questions to answer in that transaction. The motion was before the House. And what did Senator Mark do as Speaker? He entered the debate, intervened in a debate in the House, told the House that he received correspondence from the judiciary, identifying to him that this matter before the House was sub judice. And as a result of that, he, Senator Mark, has to rule. And he ruled that the debate must be discontinued because it is sub judice. Turned out that was a ruse to protect the minister who had to answer. And it was a lie. The Speaker of the House intervened and stopped a debate based on a naked, unvarnished, partisan lie, and intervened in the debate to protect a member of the House. That is Wade Mark. When the judiciary replied that they had no communication with Senator Mark, he had to apologize to the Parliament for lying to the Parliament. It must be the only time a Speaker ever did that, or had to do that. And he has the unmitigated gall to appoint himself teacher of the nation today on Constitution, and laying out for us what should happen in an office of that nature, and casting aspersion of one of the most decent and well brought up public officer with a record to prove it. Senator Mark is out of place. And the reason why I have to remind the country of all of this is based on how the PNM behaved under those circumstances. We behaved in a most dignified manner, and there was no bacchanal, no scandal, no rah-rah for you to point to them. If we had to object, we object. And I dare any of them, I see them going and quoting who said what and who said what. I dare any of them in the Robinson matter to show where I said I oppose that. Because I couldn't have. Because in the PNM caucus I was saying, I don't agree. And I will not agree. Because I have a free secret vote to make. Maybe some didn't believe me. And it was cast and counted. So today I have the moral authority to say that the Constitution makes provision for that, and my position all along has been that way. All along. Because when you look at the balance of it, and I pointed out to my colleagues in the meeting here the other day, I said I'm not campaigning for anybody. But if you look around the world, I know of no instance, or I may protect myself and go further and say, one can hardly find an instance in the 160-odd countries that are deemed to be democracies where you have a president, executive or otherwise, who is a person that has never had an involvement in the political arena? Look around the world and tell me which one. Because in the democracy practice in the modern world, leaders come up from that era, that area, that experience, and that does not disqualify them. In fact, in most instances, that is where they get their qualification. But then it is said, okay, so in this instance, this threat to our democracy and this collapse of our institution because this lady had some time with the PNM, I want to ask all of them. We've had people come out from we have had people come out of the parliament, from the political arena, and go into the judiciary. How long do they have to stay for that to happen? What is the yardstick? What is the hurdle you have to get over to move from the parliament to the judiciary? Again, given the fact that we don't have the current information provided to us on an ongoing basis, let me remind you, Dr. Aeneas Wills ran for the leadership of the PNM at a national convention of the PNM. So you can't hide him anywhere as to how PNM he was. He ran for the leadership of the PNM. And then proceeded from there, with no fanfare, to the bench. He retired as Justice Aeneas Wills. One of my colleagues, who many of you knew when she came into the political arena, I knew her before she came into the political arena. Because while people were looking at her quality and were seeking to recruit her into the political arena, in my position as deputy leader of the PNM, recruiting people for an election, I said to her, I don't think this is the best place for you. Because as I got to know her, I realized her love for the law and her respect for our jurisprudence. I said, you may better serve this country in the judiciary. That was my advice. Then I saw her again in the parliament. She distinguished herself there. She also represented Pointe-à-Pierre, the same seat that Mrs. Kangaloo represented, and she moved from there to the bench. And I dare any of them today, those who carry on this rah-rah here today, to say, well, that was a mistake, and you can't come from there to go there. The fact that some can't do it, like with Mark. Because you see, when he found out who is our nominee, he raised one point with me. And the point was this, and he raised it with great aplomb. How could I not have supported him when he was up in a similar position a few years ago? And I could come now and support the head of the Senate to go to the parliament. And I had to say to him that on matters of this nature, adjudication is made on a case-by-case basis. And while both of them may have been in the Senate, one is chalk and the other is cheese. One is fish and the other is fowl. Take your pick. So, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you all of this so you can understand that there is no real problem here as is being stirred up by the opposition, detractors, and others who set about to advise you. But it is really galling where people who I am pretty sure have never read the Constitution but have an opportunity to write or to comment, do so misleading innocent people. Because if the Constitution makes provision for it, why are you misleading people? You will hear the UNC in attempting to find something negative about Christine Kangaloo, pointing to the fact either that she was a member of parliament, she's a member of the PNM, or worse, that she was the president when Jawala Rambaran was fired. Let me take you to the Constitution again. Section 80, 1. And I quote from the Constitution in response to that attempt by them to throw shade on Christine Kangaloo. In the exercise of his functions, where he's there, me and her as well, under this Constitution or any other law, the President shall act in accordance with the advice of the Cabinet or a minister acting under the general authority of the Cabinet, except in cases where the provision is made by the Constitution or such other law that without prejudice to the generality of this exception in cases whereby this Constitution or such other law is required to act. Let me repeat the first part. The President, under this Constitution, in the exercise of functions, shall act in accordance with the advice of the Cabinet or a minister acting under the general authority of the Cabinet. In short, it means where the law says so, that it should be done so, the Cabinet will take a particular decision and the President shall, not may, the President shall carry out that action as directed by the Cabinet. And as I said here when I was here with you the last time, when the governor of the central bank, Mr. Rambaran, was dismissed from the presence of the central bank, that was a direction by a decision of the Cabinet. It was not a discretion for the President. And the President would have satisfied herself. I could tell you, the President just didn't sign it and send it back, We had to wait for the President to satisfy herself as to what the law requires of her. And when proper legal advice was had there, only then was Section 81 invoked by the President, who had no discretion. So why is Senior Counsel Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bissessa, who knows better, who ought to know better, why is she telling the country that the behavior of the President then is an indication? Well, in the case of Senator Mark, I know he has to be afraid because he thinks that we will behave the way he behaved. But we have a public record. We have a record of decades. We have a record where those persons from the PNM, from Matthew Ramcharan coming forward, once they were identified in that post of Speaker or Senate Leader, Wahid Ali and others, they never functioned in the PNM again. They immediately withdrew. Some people even resigned from the PNM when they got to those positions. That is what this country has as its legacy under the PNM. Every single one of them. It is 7 years now. Bridget Anisette George has been in the Speaker's chair. A very active member of the PNM before Attorney General and otherwise. She has dismissed her involvement in the PNM. So I ask the population to disregard the statements and the behavior of those who would generate a rah-rah because they believe that it will work for them politically. And I'll go further. This is a very clear case of supporting or not supporting. Why should we be surprised that the UNC is not supporting this? Members of the media, I want to ask you, name one thing that is going on in Trinidad and Tobago for the benefit of the people that the UNC is supporting. Name one policy or program that the PLN came up with in the last 7 years of all difficulties, whether it is COVID or VIDCO. You name one that the government is supporting, that the opposition supports the government on. In a pandemic where lives were being lost, millions of lives around the world affected, and we trying to protect ourselves here. Vaccines cannot be had and so on and so on. We had to end up fighting 60 cases in the courthouse, protecting our medical staff, because the opposition from undermining the vaccination program, undermining the understanding of the panacea and the pandemic, all of that, they support nothing. This government went to Australia to get help, to get 2 ferries for Tobago. They go all the way down to Australia to get the opposition to prevent it. This government has been executing our foreign policy in the only way we know how, as guided by the principles laid down by our history and the experience under Dr. Williams. They go and join up with others to promote President Guaido. A total variance with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, 2 weeks ago, exactly what the PLM government led in CARICOM, when I went with the Prime Minister of Barbados to New York to see the Secretary General, to put our position, the position of let the Venezuelans talk among themselves about their politics and let dialogue be the course, and indicate that we will not support regime change by force. Our opposition here was in the Lima group, supporting the overthrow of the government of Venezuela. Now that the opposition in Venezuela has come around to where CARICOM is, to where Trinidad and Tobago led CARICOM, what does the opposition have to say? They line themselves up with American sanctions, calling on the Americans to sanction the Prime Minister and the Minister in the office of the Prime Minister. Rowley and Young must be sanctioned because we're breaking American sanctions. They went further to lie on a state company, create an issue, have it published, and turn around and attack Paria, saying that Paria was supplying fuel surreptitiously to Venezuela in breach of the U.S. law. When our independent country allowed a landing at the request of the Vice President of Venezuela to visit Trinidad and Tobago, as far as they're concerned, a crime was committed, because that was done in violation of another country's sanction against the Vice President of Venezuela, and make it look as if I was behaving like a school little boy where Rowley allowed Delcy Rodriguez to come to Trinidad. Independent Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah? And that is the UNC, supporting nothing that is good for this country. Even if it means denigrating your name, lying about the Constitution, that is what they're about. We, in Trinidad and Tobago, say thank God for the civility, the stability, and the record of the PNM in the management of the affairs of this country. We continue so to do. Thank you. Yes?
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Akash Samru. Yeah, I think that will be here. Over the weekend, opposition leader Kamala Prasad says what do you think about that?
The Constitution makes provision for that. Israel Khan is a personal lawyer. Israel Khan has been in a number of political parties, the ONR, the NAR, and I dare say he has been a UNC activist. Israel Khan has been very outspoken in abusing me publicly, and the PNM and others. And therefore I think that's a good pick for Ms. Kamala Prasad. Shouldn't surprise any of us. But of course, it falls to members of the parliament. If he gets 12 votes, if he gets 12 nominees, he will be a properly nominated person. And then we go and we'll all vote in secret. And the matter will end there. There's no need for us to get on as though the country is on fire and there's no water hose. There's no need for all this bacchanal and denigration. There's a process laid out in the Constitution. And don't tell me that if I don't agree with you, you will declare war. We didn't declare war on Wade Mark when he lied to the parliament. We didn't declare war on the UNC when Wade Mark stopped a debate. You know, we have to be careful with these things. At the end of the day, if you're looking for how it should have been done and how it was done and done properly for successful outcomes, you have to look to how the PNM did it. Because we are the only ones who seem to be satisfied that when we are in the opposition, we must behave sensibly and normally. We supported the UNC when they went out there and campaigned to bring to our country the Caribbean Court of Justice. As opposition, we held the flag with them. We congratulated them. The minute they lost the election, to this day, they have continued to say they will not support the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. So you see, we're different. We are different.
No, Prime Minister, I mean, you must have anticipated that there would have been some objection to Ms. Kamala given her ties to the PNM. My question to you...
I dealt with that before. I said to you, I expect that not everybody would agree.
Understood. But putting the opposition UNC aside, I mean, some other objections to that, people are asking, wasn't there anyone in the country who was outside the political realm, someone without any long-standing political ties that you could have nominated? I
could nominate anybody in this country if the person agrees to be nominated. That's a requirement. But I will tell you, in the meeting I had with the opposition, I did tell them that before the government came to a conclusion, we did look and the way I put it, we did look from seizures to Charlottesville, from Sangre to Carnage, to see who were the people that we could consider to approach. And we did that. And we believe that we came up with what is in effect a good choice. And I will say though, we shouldn't always, let the negative, how many negative comments, be the basis on which we proceed. Because while you could tell me about how many people who might object, I could tell you about how many tens of thousands of people who accept it. So why are we disturbing ourselves that much because somebody objects? Because I could tell you, one or two of the objectors that you're seeing there, the tailor didn't have suit for them, right? So they may not have to wear that suit. So the basis of the objection might be quite different to yours. But we listen to all of it. And at the end of the day, we believe that we have come up with a nomination which didn't only satisfy the requirements of the law, but it also satisfies, in a broader sense, the population's anticipation of a person who will do justice to the office. And that's why I said to Senator Mark, while I had no problem in the case of someone coming from the politics to the presidency, which I voted for. I voted for that. And maybe you didn't know that before. I am saying that when you come to determine who that person is, then the individual comes up. And that's where Senator Mark didn't have my support. And that is where Senator Kangaloo has my total support. Yes, we are.
How do you respond to the contention that because A.N. Robinson was not a member of the UNC, that he was independent, quote unquote, of the government that appointed him?
No, we can't. I'm not stretching that chewing gum so far. You cannot be an independent in the cabinet. Our Constitution does not make provision for anybody in the cabinet who is independent on any issue. The day you find yourself at variance with the collective decision of the cabinet, you have to leave the cabinet. If you stay there, independent is not an adjective that describes you. That is a convenient argument. I've heard it said from the leader of the opposition, A.N. Robinson was chosen because he was fiercely independent. Yeah, so fierce that when the very UNC government attempted to make appointments to the cabinet, Mr. Robinson objected. And he was supported by some people, and he was denigrated by others, but the objection that he made ended up in the court. And what was the ruling? The court ruled that the president was wrong, and Mr. Pandey was right to use the provisions that he chose to use in the Constitution, which says that the people, even though they had lost the election, were not debarred from being appointed cabinet members. That's what it is. And as far as the PNM goes, we had an issue with that too, but not at the cabinet level. And that's why I'm saying the people in the university must help us out here and help out the public instead of writing, the same thing over and over and over, reinforcing who and what they are. In Tobago, there was a THA election. And up to that point in that election, nobody who had ever lost in an election in this country for the PNM was ever considered and given a position immediately after that. Nobody. But when Mackenzie was the only person who the PNM was able to be successful at an election in Tobago, we lost 11-1. Orville London had lost the seat. And Mackenzie, who was leader of PNM Tobago, wanted Orville London to be his councillor in the assembly. Prime Minister Manning loudly objected. There was a strong objection. I supported the position that Orville London could be put. And the PNM changed his position then because Mackenzie, using his authority as PNM leader in Tobago, who had to make the call, he made the call of placing Orville London in the Tobago House of Assembly as a defeated PNM candidate. So if we're going to have a discussion like they want to have in the papers, let it not just be stirring up the vitriol and the misinformation. Let us deal with how the things have evolved. And from the day Orville London was appointed, the thing had changed. So when I became leader, having supported that position then, when I became leader of the PNM, and Avinash Singh ran in Chaguanas West and lost, he was appointed to the government. So these things need to be told to the population by those who set out to educate the population. You have to educate the population on the facts, not on what you think it should be or what should serve your purpose. You might be entitled to your own disagreement, but you are not entitled to your own facts. Today I see one of my parliamentary colleagues writing to the press, to the papers again, a columnist, and saying that the time when Robinson appointed Mr. Manning as leader of the government of the 1818 was the only time a president has ever, trying to make the point that Mr. Robinson had done something wrong. It was so historic and so wrong. And I had to ask, this lady must have been a child when Dr. Williams died in 1981, sorry. Because when Dr. Williams died, all of us, especially those of us in the PNM, saw President Ellis Clark. He was the one who made the choice of George Chambers as Prime Minister. And at that time, the argument in the country wasn't that he didn't have the authority to do it, you know. It was that he should have selected this one or that one. That was the argument then. So, if we stay with the facts, if we stay with the Constitution, if we stay with the understanding that you're not going to please everybody, but you can please the majority of the people, a large majority of the people, then this country has no problem. None whatsoever. And that's why today I will not sit idly by and allow Wade Mark, the head of the UNC, who has made some of the strangest appointments in the Houses of Parliament, to come here and mislead the population that something is wrong constitutionally with the matter that we are engaged in. This matter is going very smoothly, according to the Constitution, according to the practice, according to our history. The government, having looked across the population, came up with a nominee, a very experienced nominee, which I dare say has found favor with a wide cross-section of the population. And the government stands by that. We did give the opposition the opportunity to have somebody in the mix early. They said they had no one. Well, in which case, there was a duty on the part of the government to have someone to fill the position. We proceeded from there. We said to them, if you have someone, we wait until tomorrow morning, as you said, because we have a deadline to meet on Tuesday, and Monday we would want this matter to be concluded by Monday, and we gave that time. They didn't even need that time. Within 5 minutes, we got the answer. So it's going very smoothly. The nomination has gone very well. It is legally sound in the Parliament. And from here on in, two things will happen. One, I expect we will follow the sound legal advice that we will be having, as we have been having, and that the President of the Senate will vacate that position. I did indicate to you all when I met last time that whenever that happens, the government will ensure that the position is filled, and we then will be summoned to the Parliament, to the Electoral College, as we have been. I think that notice is already out. I was reading it this morning, that we meet on the 20th of this month. So on the 20th of January, the nominated persons will be before the Parliament to be voted upon by secret ballot. That's all it is. And the person who gets the most votes there will go on to be the president of our country. And there being two candidates, as far as I'm aware of, I don't know if there are any others, that one would prevail and the other would be offered him or herself, and the results we accept the results because we expect the Parliament's processes to be beyond reproach.
Good day, Prime Minister. Paul Olindo here from the Newsday. I wanted to find out, you said that Mrs. Kangaloo will vacate her seat. Do you have any idea who government might pick to replace her?
I have a good idea.
What's that?
You would be informed in very short order.
Okay. And my second question is, I had asked last week when I was here about the public's ability to perceive Mrs. Kangalo as impartial, but extending that question, how do you think the public will be able to accept that the appointments that she has to make, especially the independent senators, will also be impartial as they should be?
Well, I mean, somebody has to do it. I mean, anybody making any decision in this country, you could find some way with such a small group of people in a small country. It's almost impossible for you not to find way. The two of them from South, two of them from Tobago, two of them went to the same college, two of them in the same golf club, two of them was in the same political party. That's how the country is. So this search for the nirvana of someone with no connection to anything in this country. And I did say that I'm not impressed with the fact that you are connected to nothing in the country qualifies you to be the head of the highest, holding the highest office in the land. Some people think so. I don't agree with that. And I don't think that because you have been involved in nation building at all levels, which is how I view public service, right? And maybe it's because of my own experience. I've been in public service now for how many years? I'm a gazetted public officer. I don't know how many of you know that. I'm a gazetted public officer working on a Saturday in the public service. I taught school in this country. I worked in the university. I worked in the Senate, in the opposition, in the government. So public service to me, I have to defend public service as honorable. It has been my life. So those who have not entered the public service arena and believe that there's another avenue, and that avenue is that you must be untainted. And by untainted, they mean you must have had nothing to do with. Let's do it the other way around. The fact that you were an officer in a political party ought to mean something in this country. That is the goal we should aim for. Because what political party would give you office if you are beyond the pale? Or if you are a crook, known crook? Such a political party is one to watch. And of course, human beings make mistakes along the way. As mistakes are made, you don't cry over the mistake that has been made. It's how you deal with it. And I could tell you that because I am leading a political party of over 6 decades in Trinidad and Tobago, and our record is one that we are very proud of.
Prime Minister, and we saw the daily newspapers today. I need to ask this, it's of national importance. Yesterday we had the tragic murder of a 6-year-old girl in Sangre Grande. Now, figures already this year put the unofficial murder toll at around probably 10, 11, 12. This, of course, on the heels of a record high murder toll last year. As Prime Minister of this country, what can you say to the families of these victims?
Well, I speak about the population, and I did make a comment somewhere out there on this particular matter when it came in, and that is the comment I'll make again. It's not a matter of how many people have been killed. There's no acceptable figure saying, okay, 100 murders, or 200 murders, or 400 murders. This country has been going down that road. What we should be more concerned about in the face of this challenge is the prevalence of the families involved in these matters, both at the level of perpetrator and victim, and the wider national family. And also the method by which these outrages are being carried out. I don't know if you're noticing that frequently in recent times, the bulk of those killings or the breaking through of doors involve firearms of the heavier types, the ones which came on the scene in not too distant past. And we're now seeing at crime scenes where more than one person is being hurt or killed, the prevalence of ammunition that was at one time very scarce in this country. There was a time in this country where that ammunition could only have been found on the range in Chaguaramas. Today it's all over the country, in the hands of all kinds of people, many of whom have chosen what they perceive to be an easy way in life. Crime pays, and it is for the government to ensure that crime does not pay, and that people are protected, and that we work towards restoring some element of safety and security in this country, which we know that crime is committed in all societies. But what is happening here now is an act of disregard, impunity, and all the arms of the state and the national population need to respond to that. And that's why I appeal to the public. If you know something, say something. The police are not magicians. Many people know who is doing what and what is going on. You could save a life. You could save this country by giving up those who have taken it upon themselves to live the life at the end of an AR-15. Those boys who are doing that, they have mothers, they have uncles, they have brothers, they have friends, they have cousins. If you know something, do the country a favor and stop protecting these criminals. It does not take very many criminals to make a population of 1.3 million people very unhappy. Doesn't take much. Nobody gets his or her hand on an AR-15 to wish you good morning. There are weapons to shed blood, and it doesn't matter whose blood. Unfortunately, I mean a 6-year-old child. A 6-year-old child falling prey to people who believe that they have a right to go to somebody's door, where your home is supposed to be your castle, blow it down, go inside and shoot up whoever they want inside there to settle whatever score they have to settle. The government's policy has always been that that ammunition ought to remain with the disciplined defense force. But of course, it isn't always so.
Do you still have confidence in your national security minister?
I said before, if there's any minister in my government that I doesn't have any confidence in, that at the moment when that confidence is lost, that would be the last day in the cabinet. I work very closely with all the ministers in my cabinet. They all have different responsibilities and different challenges. I work very closely with all of them. Thank you very much, and I trust that you will help me to educate the population. Thank you.